If you've been following bodybuilding at all lately, you've probably heard about the rash of recent deaths among several prominent bodybuilders, both amateurs and professionals. Most of these deaths have involved they're competitive bodybuilders. Some of them are current competitors. In one case, there was a guy who was actually at the contest site. He was found dead in his hotel room. George Peterson, his name was, found dead in his hotel room. I think it was 2 or 3 days before he was supposed to compete. He was a relatively young man in his 30s. I guess I never really followed through, but from what I understand, he had some underlying cardiac complications that caused his sudden death. He literally found him dead in his hotel room. So, in a situation like that, it was sudden, without warning, because a couple hours earlier, he'd been seen by his coach and others and seemed to be in good spirits, seemed to be healthy. That's the problem with some of these cardiac crises. They hit you really hard like a thunderbolt, where, you seem to be doing fine 1 minute and you're dead the next. Anyway, some of the people that have been affected by these recent deaths among bodybuilders have been retired people, older people who are long gone from their competitive days. The odds of them having died from directly, as a direct cause and effect relationship between steroid use is practically nil, because a guy who hasn't competed in 20 years or more, he'd have to be crazy to continue to take steroids. It makes no sense at all. So in those cases, I can only speculate that they might have had some cardiac damage to the heart itself that was like a ticking time bomb inside their body. And maybe as they got older, perhaps they got less active. They didn't diet as well. Maybe nutrition got out of hand, and it caught up with them to the extent that they kind of dropped dead about at 55 years or 56 years of age or whatever it was. Of course, in the younger guys who are still taking steroids, again, it's hard to point. As strange as it might seem, it's very difficult to use a cause and effect procedure to say that these particular steroids would cause this person to die. But what's that saying? I can't remember. Something about causality does not prove. I can't remember exactly how it goes. But in other words, but the odds are, knowing the physiological effects of steroids on the cardiovascular system, you'd have to say that steroids likely did play a role. When a guy or a woman dies in their 20s, you can't really call it a natural death. I mean, it's almost laughable to use that term to somebody dying in their 20s when the average lifespan is like 72 to 74. Of course, if they have, let's say, genetic abnormalities that they're not aware of, that using, let's say, certain drugs might have caused it to come to the fore and cause their death, that's a possibility too. But you haven't heard too much about women dying of deaths related to drug use, but it does happen. I mean, it has happened. I've read about a couple of cases. I've been out of the kind of loop as far as bodybuilding competition. I wrote for the bodybuilding magazines, some of the major ones, for over 35 years. When I wrote for them, I attended the top competitions. I knew all the top bodybuilders. They knew me. However, I've been out of the loop, as I said, for over 25 years. I don't know the new people. So these names of people that died, a lot of them are completely unfamiliar to me. I don't know who they are. I have no idea. But the point is, again, when somebody dies in their 20s and they're noted to have possibly used large doses of steroids, you have to wonder whether the steroids, really played a role, and they likely did. Anyway, I came across an old study that I wrote about in bodybuilding magazines years ago. This study was published in a journal called the Forensic Science International. Basically, it studies autopsy cases of people who died from various causes and tries to determine the cause of death. This particular article, it's called "Sudden Unexpected Death in a Female Fitness Athlete with a possible connection to the use of anabolic androgenic steroids and ephedrine. Excuse me. If you don't know what ephedrine is, ephedrine was a very popular supplement, started circulating in the early 90s. It was removed from sale in 2004 by the Food and Drug Administration because apparently there was a long list of adverse effects associated with it, mainly cardiovascular complications. Ephedrine in large doses is capable of causing cardiovascular problems because it stimulates the release of chemicals in the body called catecholamines, such as epinephrine and norepinephrine, which stimulate the heart. And if you take too much of it, particularly if you have a pre-existing heart condition, ephedrine could be dangerous. However, as I pointed out in numerous past videos, and I don't know, I lost count of how many articles I've written over the years about this, normal doses of ephedrine, if you had nothing wrong with your heart, or you didn't have any underlying medical conditions like high, was found naked in a pro. um, in her apartment, a dairy. That's eggs. A diary was found in which she had written a number of entries describing feelings of meaninglessness, but there was no explicit mention of suicidal intent. There was a sheet of paper in which she had logged her use of anabolic steroids during the period from September 3rd to May 15th of the year of her death. According to this log, she had used 9 different types of anabolic steroids in various combinations. In her kitchen, there were 3. Let me continue. There were 3 unmarked glass jars containing 5 different kinds of pills, as well as 3 tablet packages of clenbuterol. Clenbuterol is not an anabolic steroid. It's classified as a beta-2 agonist drug. It's used to treat asthma in Europe, mainly as a veterinarian drug to treat animals. It was never approved for use in the United States. It's what they call a long-acting beta-2 agonist. Lasts for a long time in the blood, and because of that, there's a greater chance of side effects, and it was considered not any better than existing asthma drugs. So clenbuterol was never approved for sale in the United States. The unknown pills were analyzed. They had a couple of unknown pills in her apartment. They were found to be ephedrine, tadalafil. It looks like 2 steroids and another one called Winstrol. So the tadalafil is unusual because that's a 5 well, that's basically a male a drug to treat erectile dysfunction in men. I don't know why this woman would be taking that. I mean, connection between some erectile dysfunction drugs such as Viagra and tadalafil, in the sense that they increase nitric oxide activity, and they could have slight ergogenic effects. But I don't think this was known back in 2009 or 2008, whenever this occurred with this woman. So maybe she, I don't know. She had no sign. It said she was 172 centimeters tall. Her breasts had silicone implants, which is true with most female athletes, because what happens is when the female bodybuilders, female athletes lose a lot of body fat, the breasts are largely composed of body fat and also some connective tissue. And when you lose vast amounts of body fat, especially if you're using something that blocks estrogen, the breasts literally disappear. And a lot of women do a runaround by having breast implants put in. Other findings include acne-like scarring on her face, stretch marks on the outer and upper aspects of her thighs, clitoral enlargement. These are all signs of steroid use. And small, seemingly atrophied major labia, which can be interpreted as having resulted from a general reduction in subcutaneous fat. So, let me see. She also showed something unusual in that her adrenal glands were quite atrophied. The adrenal glands, of course, secrete several important hormones, cortisol, DHA, a couple of other things. And the authors of the study offered a kind of a unique perspective that I hadn't seen in other papers. They suggested that one of the known effects of anabolic steroid use is to interfere with the let's say, the connection between glucocorticoids like cortisol and the corticosteroid receptor. In other words, basically, to put it simply, anabolic steroids block cortisol effects in the body, and that's one of the reasons why they help you grow muscle, because they block the catabolic effects of cortisol. But when you block the effects of cortisol, there's a kind of feedback mechanism, and what happens is if you extend for extended time, the glands that are stimulated by, I don't want to get into too much physiology, but that's the pituitary hormone that stimulates glucocorticoid production in the adrenals. It kind of gets turned off, and without the stimulation of ACTH, the adrenal glands will atrophy, and they think that's what might have happened in this woman. Now, theoretically, she could have had a disease called Addison's disease, which is a lack of adrenal steroid hormones, including cortisol. That alone could cause heart problems and could kill you. A famous person who had Addison's disease was President John F. Kennedy, who had to take not only cortisol drugs, but he actually took 3 different kinds. A lot of people don't know this. JFK took 3 kinds of anabolic steroids, including halotestin, testosterone propionate. I can't remember the third one. It might have been Winstrol. I don't remember. But he took the steroids to counteract the effects of taking doses of cortisol, which he had to do, or cortisol drugs, which he had to do to stay alive because his body wasn't producing that. And there's a theory, JFK was known as quite a womanizer. I'm not going to get into all the stories about that, but some people think that his heavy use of steroids to counter his cortisol use increased his sex drive so much that he was literally in heat. John F. Kennedy once told one of his close friends that if he doesn't have sex at least 3 times a day, he gets severe headaches. We should all be so lucky, right? Anyway, she, as far as her heart goes, it was, she didn't have she didn't have any coronary atherosclerosis. It was pretty clear. I only had a little bit there. So she didn't die of a typical heart attack. She had enlarged organs. She had her kidneys were enlarged, her lungs were congested, and her heart was normal sized and normally shaped, and the coronary arteries were patent. That means they were open. They weren't occluded by atherosclerosis, which is a common cause of a heart attack. The toxicology tests, in other words, this test for any kind of drugs in the blood, it showed that she had ephedrine, norepinephrine, and she had 3 different anabolic steroids in her blood, including stanozolol, and it looks like testosterone. There was one, and boldenone, also known as equipoise. That was in her blood when she died. They did a test of the liquid in her eye, which would indicate that she might have had a electrolyte disturbance from using diuretics that could have predisposed her to a sudden heart attack However, it was normal. In other words, she didn't show any electrolyte disturbances. So what they concluded was the most plausible cause of her death was judged to be a sudden cardiac arrhythmia. In other words, a sudden disturbance of normal cardiac rhythm, possibly related to a combination of otherwise unspecified inflammatory process in the heart and an acute influence of anabolic steroids and ephedrine. Unfortunately, it doesn't say how much ephedrine she used, but she'd have to use a lot of it to cause a cardiac arrhythmia. If she, according to this, she had a normal heart, she'd have to use a ton of ephedrine, something like 200 milligrams a day or something like that, to adversely affect her cardiac rhythm, since she had no predisposing cardiac health problems that would have made her more subject to health problems related to ephedrine usage. She did have some, as I said, myocardial inflammation. That might have been caused by using other drugs. This woman was a recreational drug user for a couple of years before she became a fitness athlete. And she might have used stuff like cocaine and meth or methamphetamine or speed. Now, these things directly damage the heart muscle. People don't realize that even cocaine, every time you snort a line of cocaine, you cause a little bit of damage to your heart. They're called, oh God, what is it called? I can't remember, but they get these little focal death of the heart tissue, contraction bands, they're called. They get these little contraction bands. What they are little pieces of scar tissue form in the heart every single time somebody snorts cocaine or uses any kind of, the more concentrated cocaine used, the worse the possible heart damage. And it's possible that her prior use of recreational drugs set her up for this this fatal heart rhythm disturbance, because what happens with cocaine users is they build up so much scar tissue in their heart from regular use of cocaine. They'll be walking down the street one day and they suddenly literally drop dead on the street because their heart fails, because they go into a fatal cardiac rhythm disturbances because of all the scar tissue that's formed on the heart. Anyway, so that's about it for this woman here, basically. As I said, she was an interesting case. She was otherwise healthy. She was a champion, a fitness woman. She had done well. But I just want to comment on something I've seen in other videos. I was watching a video where they were interviewing this, I guess it was a female bodybuilder. Again, I don't know these people. I've been out of the loop for many years, but I couldn't help noticing she was lying in bed. She couldn't even sit up. She was very weak, and she was talking about all the health problems she had, including severe heart problems. This woman was like maybe 30 years old or late 20s, and she mentioned how she was going to try and get a heart transplant, and she was in her late 20s. So the guy who interviewed her asked her, what drugs did she use? And drugs that literally made me fall out of my chair. And I listened to that and I said to myself, how is she even still alive? She was taking about 8 different kinds of drugs that can cause fatal cardiac rhythm disturbances. She was taking like 8 of them. And what she did is she survived, but she severely damaged her heart. Now, the interviewer said to her, where did you get the idea to use this drug program? She said she got it from some advisor, some coach, she called him, that she consulted, and she paid for this. And basically, she followed what he told her to do to the letter, and her health for the rest of her life, if she lives long enough, I don't know how long this woman's going to live, she was in bad shape, her health is shot for life, because she listened to a guy who has no medical training. He has no knowledge of any kind of emergency procedures or what to do. She shows nothing. She just listened to him. But the thing that I'll never forget is when the interviewer said to her, well, what do you think of this guy now? This guy who gave you a drug program that basically ruined your life. I expected her to say, I hate his guts and blah. She says, he's still a good friend. I talk to him all the time. I don't blame him one bit. He didn't force me to take it. Well, I don't know, what can I say for something like that? With that type of mentality, there's not much you could comment on other than to say, I just finished this. I want to just end this video by any women listening, any female athletes, female competitors. I'd be very careful of who you listen to if you're going to resort to using any type of anabolic drugs or any performance enhancing drugs. Don't just follow it without possibly researching it yourself. Don't look at these guys as experts. Don't be convinced because he helped so and so and she won 3 titles, and she helped this guy and he won Mr. So and so, that he must know what he's doing. No, that's no proof of anything. These people, a lot of them are genetically gifted who would have looked good no matter what they did or what they took. That is not proof of anything. These guys don't have the medical training. They don't know how the drugs really work. If you want to put your life in your hands, that's your business. I say to the more intelligent women out there, if something seems dangerous to you and out of line, don't do it. It's not worth it to win any kind of title if you're going to ruin your life and shorten your life. Like this woman who's like 29 years old, I was just talking about, she'll be lucky to make it to 30, 35. She'll be dead before then, unless she gets a heart transplant. She could barely breathe. She was in terrible shape, and she started out very healthy just a short time before. And the same advice goes for men too. There's a lot of these so-called coaches. They don't know their ass from their elbow, and I'm not trying to say they're all like that. Some people are more knowledgeable than others, but I have to say some of them were famous coaches, and I put that in parentheses. I'm not going to mention any names. These guys are schmucks. That's the only way I could call them. They don't know. The programs they give out are super dangerous, and you're putting your life at stake. So, it's your life to lose. That's all I can say. And I'm just going to end it there. If you want more information on nutrition, exercise science, ergogenic aids, anti-aging research you can use today, supplement science, which ones work, which ones don't, effective fat loss techniques, women's health and fitness, much more. All of this is contained each month in my Applied Metabolics publication, www.appliedmetabolics.com. It's 40 to 50 pages. When you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on nutrition, exercise, and general medicine. And I also will answer short questions submitted to me by email portal I have on my Applied Metabolics website. It's only open to, I will only answer questions from current subscribers. I don't answer unsolicited questions. And that's about it. If it seems like I'm having a little trouble or my voice sounds strange in this video, I wasn't going to say this. I didn't announce this publicly, but I might as well tell you guys. Right now, sitting here, I have COVID-19. Yeah, I got COVID-19 after avoiding it for 3 years. I did everything right. I avoided it. I did everything you could possibly do. But they have this new strain, and I was vaccinated twice. I had a booster. I was going to get a second booster until I read a medical journal report indicating that the second booster only lasts an average of 4 weeks, and they don't even know how effective it is against the mutated strain, so I didn't bother with the second booster, but I did get the first booster. To my chagrin, as I found out, being vaccinated with a booster offered zero protection against this new strain, which is called BA5, Omicron, BA5. This is the latest strain that's going around now. Yesterday here in Los Angeles, there were 18,000 new cases of COVID. So to say that COVID is over is laughably wrong. I wish it was, because the reason I'm telling you all this is to warn you not to do something stupid like I did. And I'm going to tell you what I did and how I got it. I attended a Muscle Beach contest. I went to a breakfast where there was people, nobody was wearing masks. You won't believe this, I had 2 masks in my pocket. I was going to double mask to protect myself. But I figured, well, I know these people, and most of them have probably been vaccinated. It's okay. So I'll keep my mask off. And then I went down to the contest, and I sat in a little section right with a bunch of people right before me. Somewhere between the breakfast and sitting in that section watching the contest, I contracted, without question, the timing was perfect. I contracted COVID-19. So experienced at the moment. And also, I have to say that if I'm hoping that the vaccinations I did have the one thing that they're really supposed to do is to prevent you from having to be hospitalized, especially being put on a respirator, because once that happens, you only have a 10% chance of survival of COVID. So I'm hoping, thus far, I haven't felt the need to have to go to a hospital. I tried to get a hold of this new drug by Pfizer, an oral drug that supposedly helps to, reduce the symptoms very fast. But unfortunately, I couldn't get it in time. I've now had COVID for like 6 days. It's getting a little better now. It was really bad the first couple of days. The symptoms I had were runny nose, extreme headache, aches and pains all over the body, a little bit of coughing twice. Which proved to be positive. The thing that really convinced me was the extreme fatigue. Well, the last time I felt fatigue like that was when I had the flu back in 1991, where I was so weak, I literally couldn't stand up. I had my back for like 2 days. I couldn't even walk across the room. It was the best way. It felt like every bit of energy had been drained from my body, and that's what this feels like. The first 2-3 days. It felt like all the energy had all you wanted to do was lie down. I mean, I could barely. Walking my dog, I probably looked like I was like a 90-year-old man. I could barely walk. I was just so tired. Luckily, most of it. Right now, you could probably tell by my voice, I'm still congested, and I still have a little bit of soreness in the body. Right before I did this video, I did a retest to see, because it's been 6 days. I wanted to see if maybe I wasn't testing positive. Unfortunately, I was. So I just tested about an hour ago. I still have COVID. After 10 days, which would be this Friday, supposedly I can go out in public. But here's another lesson to be learned. I will not go out in public and even wearing a mask and risk getting other people sick. This is what a decent human being does. I'm certainly not going to go to the gym and get a whole bunch of people sick. I can't think of a lower thing to do, to go to a gym or go out in public and not wear a mask when you have symptoms of COVID. You got to be a real psychopath to do that. Which I think have helped a lot. I think if it wasn't for the supplements I use, I take certain nutrients such as NAC, vitamin C, and others, which actually block the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes COVID from getting deep into the body. Hopefully, I've been able to do that. So I just want to let you guys know that if you think that everything is home free, I made that mistake. I figured that by now, the odds. Even though I knew that there was a new strain going around, I figured, the odds of me catching it at this contest was very low. I was dead wrong. You never know when somebody's carrying it. Who knows how many people there had it. I don't know, couldn't tell you who gave it to me. I wasn't around that many people at the contest, but somebody definitely was contagious and gave it to me. So, my advice is, until this thing is completely gone, get vaccinated. Get the booster if you need that too. Yes, I will admit it will not prevent you from being infected with the new strain. If you get in close contact with somebody who is infected, you still will get it. But I believe it will keep you from going in the hospital, and possibly even prevent what they call long haul COVID, which is the worst complication of the disease other than death. That's a series of permanent side effects that you have for the rest of your life. If the vaccinations I had prevent that, I'll consider them worth it. And I'm not at all sorry for vaccinations. So, because, the virus mutated, and unfortunately the vaccinations, they work best for the original strain. They're not as effective. Actually, they're not effective at all against the new strains as far as becoming sick, but they do hopefully prevent hospitalization. So that's about it. And if you think all this is nonsense, and that people that are wearing masks are being paranoid, well, go ahead and believe that and see what happens. But trust me, you don't want to get you don't want to get COVID. It's a terrible disease, and it's nothing to play with. The best way I could describe it, if you ask me in one sentence, just imagine having the worst flu you could imagine and the worst cold you could imagine at the same time. So take care. Thanks for listening.